How did microphones change between when you started, in the Let It Be Abbey Road era to Pink Floyd, to Dark Side of the Moon?
All the Abbey Road engineers had sort of favorites, and I think that those favorites rubbed off on me. I mean, if I heard a C12 on piano sounding great, then I would use a C12 on piano next time I recorded a piano. The microphone choices really didn't change very much. I mean, I'd be perfectly happy recording today with the same set of mics that.
So what would you use on the bass drum? What would be a microphone for the bass drum?
A D20.
D20 AKG.
Yeah.
And KM84 on the snare normally, or you said on here it's
in later years, yeah.
87.
But this clearly says that I was using an 87 on the snare.
And then for the overhead mics would be?
Nearly always 4038s.
Coles.
Yes. I had not started to use the 4038s at this point, obviously. Yeah, I love the ribbon sound on overheads. Whether it's the figure 8 pattern that does it, or if it's the quality of the mic itself. The Coles mics are very dull sounding. I mean,
yeah.
you think, oh, that sounds dull, but so the first thing you do is put 10 dB of 10K onto it before even listening to it. I would do that.
EQing for tape is kind of a lost art. These are just things that you would do naturally. You'd boost the high end if you're using ribbon mics like that are dull, and adding that 10K is just kind of an automatic thing.
And it was also a question of not just how each microphone was EQ'd or how it sounded, but you had to balance it. I mean, yeah. Because you didn't have enough tracks. A lot of the tracks on Dark Side ended up being bass and drums on the first pair of tracks.
Wow.
I mean,
so you're just locked in then.
Yeah. I mean, you had to get it right.
It'd be mixed at the console. They would be combined then, and they would go down on tape that way.
Dark Side did go to a second generation of 16 tracks. So
okay.
First 16 track would have probably had a separate kick drum, snare, and then everything else. So
okay.
4 tracks. On the second 16 track, couldn't afford 4 tracks for drums. You had to just say, let's get it right and stick the bass on there as well. And then we've got 14 tracks to play with, which we needed.
Dark Side of the Moon is one of the most popular records, one of the greatest sounding records of all time. It's got to be so gratifying to have been involved in making that record.
It was. And that satisfaction culminated in getting my first Grammy nomination. So didn't win, but I was nominated.
Is it true that the 8-track of Dark Side of the Moon is a different mix or different version? Somebody had told me that.
The 8-track cartridge, you mean?
Yeah.
There was a quadraphonic mix, which was released on an 8-track, yes. And I did that on my own with no band members there, no producer, just me and Peter James, the tape op. So there's a couple of things missing because I just couldn't handle all the inputs and finding all the tapes that made up the final stereo mix.
And how long did it take to make this record?
We do 2 weeks at a time, 2-3 weeks at a time. And I was actually going out with the band to do their front of house, to do their live sound. And I was still doing other sessions at Abbey Road for other people. But I worked very hard to make sure that I never missed a Pink Floyd session because I didn't want to share the credit with anybody else.
I'd like to take a second to talk to you about this channel. This is actually Rick Beato 2. I've had it since the beginning of my main channel, and many of you are not subscribed. As a matter of fact, 87% of the people that watch this channel regularly are not subscribed. So I encourage you to hit the subscribe button on this channel and on my main channel. This will help me get even more of my dream guests and help continue to grow both channels. Thank you. They typically do overdubs in the control room. How would you do that?
As far as David Gilmour's guitar overdubs, I mean, we did most of it actually in the studio. I mean, he'd be out there with the headphones on. But on occasion, we ran a long cable into the control room.
Would they listen to songs over and over and say, I like this, I don't like this, let's change this?
They were all critical of each other's performances, and were not afraid to say, you know, if David Gilmour had produced a incredible guitar solo on something, Roger might say, "I think that might be all right, David. Thank you." Yeah. Pretty sort of low key congratulations,
How would vocals typically be done at that time period?
Well, obviously the lead vocal was the first thing to happen. What's interesting to note, and most people have not really noticed, the first appearance by Roger Waters as on vocal is on the Lunatic song.
Interesting.
Through to the end.
Yeah.
And everything else has been David up to that point. And you hadn't realized that, right?
I did not realize that. No, that's amazing.
Then I mean, David did all the third above or harmony vocals, 3-part harmonies, and then we got the girls in. Those 3 great singers that did the backing vocals.
When you were mixing that record, would everybody be at the console moving the faders for their own parts?
Yeah, of course, there was no automation back then.
Yeah.
So if something needed to be nudged, and everybody only had 2 pairs of hands,
Yeah.
So everybody only had 1 pair of hands. Sorry.
Would you mix songs in sections and then edit the master tape together typically?
Yes. There would be too many changes to get right through a 3-minute or 4-minute song.
Let's say you get a verse right, and then you'd say, okay, we have that verse. Let's cut it, put it on a reel here, go set it over there. Is this kind of how it would go down? Then let's work on the chorus.
Yeah.
And then you do
and then
that.
you'd pray that the edit would work when you had to join the 2 bits together.
Where would you like to typically splice? On a bass drum, on a snare drum, what?
Yeah, usually a downbeat. There are plenty of edits in the. If you play the master tape, you will see little white tape joints going through all the time.
As soon as you would join these sections together, you'd listen through it a bunch of times. Anybody hear anything? Was that kind of like, how's that sound?
Yeah, I mean, there was one new boy that came in. That was Chris Thomas. He was an influence there. He wanted to use compression rather more than I did, and I'm. In case you didn't know, I'm somewhat anti-compression.
You're anti-compression.
Yeah.
Talk about that a bit.
I just like the music to breathe in its own way. Compression is okay if it's literally just to take the extreme high-level elements down, but I don't like the sound of limiting and compressing on a mix. I love it on vocals. I love it on bass guitar, but that's almost invariably I would compress a bass and automatically any vocals.
You would do it on the tracking it.
Yeah.
And what would you use typically for something like that? For
Fairchild, always a Fairchild.
Always a Fairchild.
Yeah. We were using Keypex expanders on the transfer from one to the other, and we used them on the mix as well. Occasionally I used the Allison Research Gain Brain, just a tiny little thing, 6 inches high and an inch wide.
What is that?
It's a limiter.
Okay.
It's just a limiter and compressor. But it had a nice sound to it. We used that on a couple of occasions.
Now, the Beatles, would they use compression on the mixes at the time?
Jeff Emerick did enjoy compression quite a lot more than I did.
Yeah.
I don't remember whether he actually compressed overall on the mixes on Abbey Road, but
do you think that's why Dark Side of the Moon has a lot of punchiness to it still?
I remember saying to Chris, can we please not use the compressor on this mix? I said it's going to destroy the drum sound. I'm not going to enjoy listening to the drums. And he said, okay, well, compress everything except the drums, and that's what we did on a couple of occasions.